G'day guys! This weekend I'm going to be attending the Steel City Warhammer 40k Teams event. This is going to be my first event for 10th edition Warhammer 40k, and I'm going to go through today the World Eaters list that I'm going to be running for this event, and I'm going to break down all of the little combos, the tricks, the strategies that I'm planning to employ in my games of Warhammer 40k. So let's get into it.
Look for the Blood God.
Alrighty, before we break down the list, let's just talk a little bit about the event. Now, this is a teams event, 5-man teams. There'll be 5 players on each team going toe-to-toe with other teams of 5 players to see which one gets overall the highest score, determining which team wins. So for those of you who have never attended a teams tournament before, I highly recommend them. I think they are the best way to play Warhammer 40k hands down, and I've done several videos breaking down this topic, which I'll put in the links in the description. If you haven't tried Team 40k, it is absolutely amazing. I highly recommend it. This event, I was actually on board as a coach for one of the Team Australia teams. However, at last minute, the event had some dropouts and the tournament organizer has asked me to step in and play on the Mercenaries team, which is sort of like the Gumby, if you will. And yeah, so basically I just quickly threw together a World Eaters list with some of the combos, some of the work in progress ideas that I had on the fly, and I will be now playing as part of that mercenary team. So let's get stuck straight into talking about what I'm bringing in the list and why it's there, what combos I have, and what sick tricks I think I'm going to be attempting to pull off on the day. Alrighty, here we have it. So it is a World Eaters list. It does have an allied Chaos Knight as well, but more or less it's all World Eaters crazy, blood-soaked carnage. So we have Angron, the madman himself, leading the charge. Angron, I think, is really, really strong in a World Eaters list. He's not always going to bring his value, but those games when he does go in, he gets his advance and charge, he kills big things that are troublesome for you, your opponent kills him, then you resurrect him with your Blessings of Corn Rolls. In those games where you're able to pull off all of that sort of stuff, he is an absolute game winner, and he tackles some of the bigger challenges that the other World Eaters units struggle with. So that's why Angron's in the list. He also provides rerolls or +1 to charge depending on what you need to nearby units, which greatly increases the utility of your other World Eaters pieces. So he's a bit of a force multiplier, and he's a powerful beat stick in his own right, and he's surprisingly tough, and he gets resurrected. What's not to love? Next up, we have 2 Masters of Executions, which I call Mo. So what we've got is we've got Modest Mo. He's the one with the Favored of Corn relic, and basically that allows you to reroll your Blessings of Corn roll, which increases the probability of you getting that advance and charge, and also increases the probability of you bringing Angron back. So these 2 really, really powerful things that you really want to be getting off in every game as often as possible. So Modest Mo, he brings the Favored of Corn, and he has a retinue of 5 Corn Berserkers. One of the reasons that the Corn Berserkers are there is because that's the only unit that he can be attached to, and when he is leading a unit, that unit gains the ability to always fight first, which is really, really powerful. So even though Corn Berserkers themselves are a relatively underwhelming data sheet, they don't do a massive amount of damage and they are quite expensive, what I view them as is an upgrade for that character. So basically think of it like 115 points, which is an expensive upgrade, but it gives him an extra 10 wounds, it gives him an extra 10 objective control, it gives him the ability to do blood surge moves, it gives him the ability to fight first, and it gives him a boatload of extra attacks. So if you look at all of that, you're like, well, fucking of course you'd spend 115 points for all of that. Whereas if you view it as a unit in itself, you're like, well, yeah, but it gets outcompeted by other units. But when you view it as an upgrade for a character who is there to do a very specific thing, then all of a sudden they're actually quite an interesting piece. So that's Modest Mo. Then next we have Murder Mo. Now this guy has the Berserker Glaive upgrade enhancement, and he is an absolute maniac. So basically against characters, he's going to be going in with 6 + D3 attacks on the charge, and he's going to be re-rolling hits, hitting on 2s, and then he's going to be doing 2 plus D3 damage with devastating wounds and reroll wounds, meaning every 6 to wound that you roll, and you're getting rerolls on these, so you're likely to roll multiple 6s, is going to be doing between 4 and 5 mortal wounds. So this guy routinely kills a big knight if it's a character. He routinely kills Angron. He goes and kills Abaddon. He kills Drago. He kills, Valdor or whatever his name is. He kills the Custodes guy, whatever his name is. He kills it all. He goes in and absolutely blends things. So he's really, really exciting. And again, he has those 5 berserkers with him as well, just as another way of facilitating all of those different bits and pieces that he can do on the table. Now, one of the reasons that the fights first is so critical there is because it means that if you go in, you say you rapid ingress, and then in your turn you move, you charge something, you rip it apart with your chain glaive, then when your opponent goes to charge you back, you get to fight first, and you're probably going to kill that unit as well. And it makes this unit really, really hard to deal with in melee. So if you can play around the shooting elements of your opponent's list by using line of sight blocking, terrain, and using the ability to make blood surge moves on these units and try to get into melee, then you're going to have a lot of fun. So that's Murderous Mo, or Murder Mo. He goes in and he just does absolutely massive amounts of damage to enemy characters particularly. So he's my headhunter. Then we've got a unit of Jackals. Now, Jackals, even though I only have 1 unit in this list, I actually think Jackals are probably one of the best things in the World Eaters book. The ability to sticky objectives is really good, and also the fact that they gain access to all of the different things like the advance in charge, like the 6-up Feel No Pain, which goes to a 5-up Feel No Pain on these guys. They're just a really good utility piece, and they're also great for doing your objectives and things like that. So, if you draw certain tactical objectives, you can send the Jackals to go and do it, and they're pretty reliable and consistent in their ability to achieve that. Next up, we have 2 units of 3 8-bound. Now, these were a bit of a questionable pick. I want to try them out in this event, but basically what I'm doing with them is I've got a Land Raider as well, and this is a very specific combo, where basically the plan is I'm going to deploy the Land Raider out of line of sight, and then 6 inches in front of the Land Raider, you deploy both units of 8-bound. Now, because the 8-bound have a scout move, which allows you to make a normal move after you know who's going first, you can basically, if your opponent goes first and there's nowhere to hide your 8-bound, they can pre-game move with their scout move back into the Land Raider which is out of line of sight, and thus safe. They're not going to kill you no matter how much barrage they have. They're not killing a Land Raider that they can't see. That's very hard to do. And that means that in your first turn, well, in your opponent's first turn, they're not going to kill the Land Raider, and then in your first turn, you're going to be able to launch those 8-bound out, advance charge, go huge distances with them, and do serious damage. But if you go first, and you don't need to worry about their barrage weapons, and you don't need to worry about their shooting capacity, well, then you just scout move forward, move your 9 inches, +2 from your blessings roll if you have it, then you're advancing, auto 6 advance on one of them, so you're going real deep into your opponent's lines, and you're picking off medium to small things. The damage output on the 8-bound is way lower than it used to be, but it's still relatively good. They're going to kill a whole ton of Marines. They pretty much routinely go through an entire Desolation squad of, the Marines with indirect shooting, that sort of stuff. They kill medium to small things very, very well. The reason I went with 2 units of 3 instead of a single unit of 6 is because it gives you 2 lacerators. So you get 2 champions this way, and that lacerator weapon on the champion being 3 damage is very, very relevant. It means that he can go into Terminators and the like and actually do pretty heavy damage. And it also means that the unit can split up and go and engage on multiple fronts. If there's something I need to do over here and something I need to do over there, I can do it. Or say there's an action that I need to complete in the center of the table and I want to go in and charge something, I can do it because I have 2 units instead of just putting it all eggs in one basket and having 1 unit, which really does limit your capacity. Next thing we have is 2 Mauler Fiends. Now, I really, really like the Mauler Fiends. I think they're relatively tough and they're super fast. It's a little bit tricky to move around terrain, but if you can get those angles, these things can go so fast into your opponent's line. They move 10 inches plus 2 inches from the blessing, so 12, plus an auto 6 advance. So now you're moving 18 inches. Then you can charge and you can get +3 to their charges, provided that the target of the charge has taken damage of some sort and they're near Angron, because Angron can give them an aura of +1 to charge. So what that means is the Land Raider can pop out, shoot a las cannon into, say, a knight or something like that, put a wound on it, just has to be a single wound, and then that Mauler Fiend goes in with +3 to his charges after moving 18 inches, which is crazy fast down the table, and then he's going to charge in and blow up whatever the Land Raider marked for him. So that's a really cool little combo, the Mauler Fiend Land Raider 8-bound combo, and I think that's going to do a lot of work. And then in terms of popping transports, clearing enemy screens, holding your objectives that are sort of sideways to your home, often you'll have your home objective and then you'll have some in no man's land, one of which you sort of have to go away from your opponent to get, and the other ones are sort of towards your opponent. That's what the Brigand is in the list for. He's really fast with a 12-inch move. He has OC of 8, which means he's really effective at taking objectives off your opponent, and he's just one piece that doesn't have to be going full hog straight into the enemy at full speed the whole time. He can just sort of sit back, contribute from medium range, and pop the transports so that berserkers can charge, those sorts of things. So that's basically all of the pieces in the list. Now, there's a few different ways that this list can be played, and I always think that lists that have versatility in the way that they are deployed and the way that they engage in the game are always at an advantage. So basically, if my opponent has no indirect shooting whatsoever, or maybe he's got very limited shooting in general, I can actually deploy all of this on the table. And what I can do is I can put both the Master of Executions and both units of 5 Berserkers, because that's 12 models, I can put that inside the Land Raider, and then the 8-bound can just do their pre-game move forward, charge things, and if my opponent goes first, they just pre-game move out of line of sight and they're safe. So the whole army is on the table and it's all safe. And in those games, I maybe use strategic reserves for 1 or 2 of the Mauler Fiends, and if I do that, I can pretty much hide the entire army out of line of sight in that first turn. Whereas if my opponent does have indirect, then what I do is I can put both the Master of Executions and their Berserker units in strategic reserves, and that way that frees up the transport capacity of the Land Raider to house the 8-bound if my opponent goes first, and then I can basically aim to rapid ingress those character-led Berserker units, and with rapid ingress, you're going to be able to drop 9 inches away from them, and then in your next turn, move 6 inches plus an advance, which can be an auto 6 advance if you need it to be, and then go in and do your charges, do your damage that way. And rapid ingressing these guys is really good because you can put them outside of line of sight of your opponent, and because these guys have always fights first, if they go, okay, I can't shoot you, I'm going to charge you, you're like, bring it on. You charge me, I fight first, and I kill the thing that just charged me. So they're a real problem unit for rapid ingress for your opponent, provided there is somewhere that you can bring them on that's out of line of sight. Another cool trick with them is if you want to bring them on somewhere where they're within line of sight of something relatively small, when your opponent goes to shoot at you, in their turn, you've just arrived from rapid ingress, but you can use your Blood Surge moves to get closer to them. So this means that, let's say you're near an objective marker, you might not be able to walk onto the objective marker from the table edge, but your opponent is disincentivized to shoot you, because if they shoot you, you can use your Blood Surge move to end on the objective marker, provided, it's between you and them. So they've got some really cool tricks. I think they're a lot of fun. And Angron, of course, ton of fun. Mauler Fiends, ton of fun. Land Raider, cool as. The War Dog Brigand, he's going to be probably the most questionable part of the list. He could have been a Forge Fiend. He could have been, a couple of units of Jackals, because they can fill a similar role in that they go around holding objectives and things like that. The downside of him being a Chaos Knight is he won't gain access to any of the World Eater's stratagems. Some of the key stratagems that I'm planning to use in this list are things like when one of my units dies, if it was holding an objective marker, I can spend a CP and I continue to hold that objective marker. So that's really cool for if one of the Mauler Fiends moves out onto an objective marker and my opponent blows it up, I can just go, cool, I'll hold that objective anyway, I don't care. Same with the Berserkers, same with the Land Raider itself. And if he was a Forge Fiend, then he would be able to do it too. So there's definitely a world where you swap him out for Forge Fiend. They're both 150 points. The reason I haven't done that is because one of my friends is borrowed my Forge Fiends for the event, and at the time I wasn't intending to play. I was planning to come along as a coach for Team Australia. But now that I'm playing, I had to throw this list together. So yeah, that's the list. I'm really excited. I think it's going to do well. World Eaters do have something like a 30% win rate considering all events around the world at the moment. So it's by no means an A tier list or an A tier faction, but I think it's going to be a ton of fun to play. I think it's going to do surprisingly well. I think a lot of people will underestimate it. And I think if certain things go off, like I get my Blessings of Corn rolls that I need to get my advances and charges, I'm able to resurrect Angron, I'm able to advance and charge and kill big things with Angron, medium things with 8-bound, small things with Berserkers. You know, the Maulafines are able to go in and deal with those hard targets. I think this list has some potential to do quite well, particularly given that I'm going to be sticking objectives with my Jackals. Every time one of my units dies, I'm going to be able to spend a command point in order to stick that objective as well. So objective control is going to be a strong element of this list, as is damage. It's obviously got some pretty big weaknesses in that the vast majority of the damage output is coming from melee, and a lot of it is coming from monsters like Angron and the Maulafines, which struggle with heavy terrain and ruins and things like that because I can't walk through those walls. So it's got some weaknesses in that regard, and also the fact that your opponent, if they've got a lot of infantry, they can just screen you out and you can only hit their front rows. So things like Gene Stealer Cult, I'm thinking that's just like an automatic loss. There's not much I can really do about that. But yeah, I think it's going to be a ton of fun. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Wish me luck, and I will keep you updated throughout the event.
Look for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable,